The emergency alarm screamed through the corridors of the SS Terran Fury as the ship hurtled through space, surrounded by enemy fire. Lieutenant Adrian Blake gripped the helm, his knuckles white as he tried to steady the ship. The massive alien warships, sleek and deadly, circled them like sharks in the dark void. Their weapons fired relentlessly, tearing into the hull, sending sparks and smoke through the ship. The cloaking device had failed, leaving them exposed. Adrian could feel the heat rising as the ship's core reached its breaking point. They were sitting ducks. "Damage report," Adrian barked, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're losing power in the main engines, sir," came the frantic reply from one of the crew members. "The shields are down. We're sitting on a timer here." Adrian's mind raced. There were no escape routes. Their only chance was a miracle, but miracles didn't come easy. A quick glance at the view screen revealed the enemy warships closing in, their weapons charging for the final blow. Time was running out. He gritted his teeth and activated the distress beacon, sending a last-ditch call for help. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. As he prepared for the inevitable, the ship lurched violently as another blast hit the starboard side. Adrian's heart raced as sparks showered around him. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze in place. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, the massive Carithian warship appeared. One moment, the vastness of space was empty, and the next, the enemy ship was there, emerging from a cloaking device. It was like a ghost ship, its dark metallic surface shimmering in the distant light of the stars. Adrian barely had time to react as the Carithian vessel fired back at the attacking alien ships, taking them by surprise. "Brace for impact," Adrian shouted, slamming his hand down on the console. But just as the Carithian ship's weapons lit up the sky, another explosion rocked the Terran Fury. The ship's engines failed, and the SS Terran Fury lurched violently to the side, spiraling toward the planet below. Adrian's stomach dropped as the ground rushed toward them. He could hear the crew shouting in panic as the ship descended rapidly. The planet's surface looked like a swirling mass of clouds and rocky terrain. With everything out of his control, Adrian knew there was no way to avoid the crash. He had to make peace with the fact that this might be the end for him and his crew. But just as the ship's nose tilted downward, preparing to make a deadly impact, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Prepare to board the human vessel. I will not let them die." Adrian blinked in disbelief. The words were sharp and confident, full of authority. He turned just in time to see a streak of light shoot across the sky, followed by a series of explosions as the Carithian warship destroyed the remaining enemy ships in a series of surgical strikes. The world seemed to slow as the alien ship maneuvered closer to the SS Terran Fury. The shadows of Carithian soldiers appeared on the view screen, their cloaking technology allowing them to move undetected. The ship's hull groaned, and Adrian braced himself as the alien warship extended a massive docking arm toward the Terran Fury. In the chaos, Adrian barely had time to react. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the halls as a Carithian soldier boarded the ship. The figure was tall and imposing, her figure illuminated by the faint glow of distant stars. Adrian's breath caught in his throat as the alien captain stepped into the wrecked bridge. She was striking, even by alien standards. Her features were sharp and proud, with dark, regal eyes that gleamed with authority. She wore a battle suit, sleek and advanced, covered in glowing runes that pulsed with energy. Adrian felt a jolt of shock and awe as she turned to face him. "You are the human commander." The woman's voice rang out, calm and measured. Adrian took a deep breath, trying to mask his awe. "Yes, I'm Lieutenant Adrian Blake," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thank you for saving us." The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes scanning him in a way that felt like she was seeing right through him. "I am Captain Jera of the Carithian fleet," she said, her voice unwavering. "I saw your distress signal and chose to intervene. You are lucky to be alive." Adrian stared at her, trying to comprehend the situation. Here was an alien, a captain no less, who had just saved him and his crew. But the questions were too many to ask at once. Who were the Corinthians? Why did she help them? What did she want in return? You have questions, Jera said, sensing his confusion. I will answer them once you are in my care. Your ship is beyond saving, but you are not. Before Adrian could respond, Jera gave a command, and her soldiers began securing the area. She turned and motioned for Adrian to follow. As the crew of the SS Terran Fury was led into the Corinthian warship, Adrian's mind raced with questions. He had just been rescued by an alien captain, and his survival seemed like nothing short of a miracle. But as the Corinthian ship's doors closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story, one that might change the fate of humanity forever. Adrian woke up to a strange and unfamiliar hum. His head was pounding, and his body felt heavy. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light around him. The smell of antiseptic and something metallic filled the air. The room was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was smooth and clean, made of materials he couldn't identify. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint glow. As his senses returned, he realized he wasn't on his ship anymore. The last thing he remembered was the Corinthian warship pulling him aboard, followed by the chaos of enemy fire and the violent crash of his ship. Now, he was in an alien environment, surrounded by technology that felt both advanced and foreign. He instinctively tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest stopped him. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. You are awake. Adrian turned his head sharply to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was her, the Corinthian captain who had saved him. Captain Jera stood in the doorway, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She looked even more imposing up close. Her tall frame, elegant but strong, was framed by her armor that shimmered with strange symbols. She had a calm expression, but her eyes held a depth of wisdom and something else, something Adrian couldn't quite place. You're on my ship now, she said, her voice smooth but firm. You are safe. For now. Adrian didn't know how to respond. His mind was still racing, trying to process everything. The Corinthians were an ancient race of aliens, but he knew little about them beyond rumors. Were they friendly? Or was this some sort of trap? He couldn't be sure. He sat up slowly, his body aching. Where are my people? The rest of my crew? Adrian asked, his voice hoarse. Jera didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, looking at him with an unreadable expression. Your crew is safe for now. You are the only survivor of the SS Terran Fury. The words hit Adrian like a punch in the gut. His ship was gone, and his crew, his friends, were dead. He had failed them. His mind flashed back to the chaos on board, the final moments of his ship before it spiraled out of control. The helplessness of those final moments lingered in his mind. Why help us? Adrian asked suddenly. His voice was raw, and he couldn't hide the suspicion in his tone. Why save me? You could have left us to die. Jera studied him for a moment, and for the first time, Adrian noticed a flicker of something. Was it sympathy? Or something deeper? I saw your distress signal. I could not let you die. She paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. I have my reasons, human. But for now, you need to rest. Adrian didn't feel like resting. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the situation. He had been saved by an alien, and he didn't know whether he should be grateful or terrified. Jera was not the typical enemy he had imagined when he thought of aliens. She didn't have the cold, hostile demeanor he expected. There was a certain nobility in her eyes, something he couldn't ignore. What happens now? He asked, trying to sound more composed than he felt. We travel. The Corinthian fleet is not safe here. We are being pursued, she replied cryptically. Adrian frowned. Pursued? By whom? Jera's expression darkened slightly, her tone turning more serious. By the AI forces that are hunting you. They will stop at nothing to erase humanity. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. The AI. He had heard rumors about rogue eyes, but to hear they were actively hunting humanity, chasing him now, was terrifying. It meant that their fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The Carithians didn't just want to help them survive. They were fighting an enemy that had already caused so much destruction. "You can't be serious," Adrian said, his voice trembling. "An eye army. You can't fight them alone." Jera looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "We have no choice but to fight. The AI is relentless. They have already wiped out entire civilizations. If we don't stop them, they will come for your world next." Adrian's mind raced. He had always known there were threats beyond Earth. He had fought against alien invaders before, but nothing like this. A war with a seemingly unstoppable AI force. He couldn't fathom it. "We need to prepare," Jera continued, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "You will help us, human." Adrian blinked in surprise. "Me? How can I help you? I'm just one man." Jera's gaze softened slightly, though her eyes remained intense. "You underestimate yourself. Your skills, your knowledge of tactics of war, are valuable. I've seen humans fight. You are resourceful. More than that, you have heart. The Carithian people value strength. And you, Lieutenant Blake, have that strength." Adrian didn't know what to say. Her words were unexpected, and they struck something deep within him. He wasn't sure if he could trust her yet, but there was a strange pull in his chest. He didn't want to be a captive. He didn't want to be at the mercy of this alien race, but something in Jera's eyes told him she wasn't just using him. She believed in him. "How do we stop them?" Adrian asked, his voice suddenly filled with purpose. Jera gave him a sharp nod. "We fight, together." The door to the room slid open, and a Carithian soldier stepped inside, looking to Jera. "Captain, we have detected AI ships in our sector. They are closing in fast." Adrian's heart dropped. The danger was real, and it was already at their doorstep. Jera turned to Adrian, her face now set with determination. "Get ready, human. The battle begins now." Adrian felt a surge of adrenaline. For the first time since the attack on his ship, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't a captive anymore. He was a fighter, and with the Carithians at his side, he would stand against this relentless force. He wasn't sure how, but he knew one thing. He was not going down without a fight. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the corridors of the Carithian warship. Adrian stood in front of the observation window, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars seemed so distant, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. The ship's engines hummed with power, but there was no real sense of peace. Every minute, every second, he felt the looming presence of the enemy creeping closer. Jera had been quiet for most of the journey. She had retreated into her thoughts, her focus entirely on the task ahead. Adrian could tell that the threat of the eye was more real than anything he had ever faced. He had fought battles, survived impossible odds, but the idea of an enemy that could think, adapt, and strike with no mercy was terrifying. How could anyone fight something like that? A voice broke his thoughts. "Lieutenant Blake, you're needed." Adrian turned to see Jera standing behind him. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. She had always been in control, but now there was a crack in her armor. Something was coming. The tension in the air was thick, and he could feel it pressing on his chest. He followed her to the command center. The room was large, filled with alien technology, and Carithian soldiers working tirelessly to monitor the ship's systems. As they entered, the atmosphere seemed to shift, all eyes turning toward Jera. "Captain," one of the soldiers called, his voice anxious. "The AI fleet has detected our location. They're moving faster than we expected." Adrian's stomach sank. "How fast?" he asked, trying to mask the fear creeping into his voice. Jera's eyes flashed. "Too fast. They're adapting to our movements. They know where we are." "What's our plan?" Adrian asked, trying to focus. He had fought against alien invaders before, but this was different. This wasn't just a group of warships. This was an intelligence that could learn, evolve, and anticipate every move. Jera didn't answer immediately. She turned to her officers, issuing commands with precise authority. The room became alive with activity. She motioned for Adrian to follow her to the strategy table, a holographic map of space unfolding before them. The AI operates with a central consciousness. Jera began, her voice steady despite the growing tension. It can control entire fleets of ships with ease, directing them as one unit. The problem is that they've started to adjust to our tactics. They'll know what we do before we do it. Adrian's mind raced as he processed the information. A single AI, controlling an entire fleet. That was a nightmare. The odds were stacked against them, and they didn't even know the full extent of the AI's power. "Do we have any chance?" Adrian asked, though the question sounded more like a plea. Jera met his gaze. For the first time, there was a flicker of something like fear in her eyes. The AI is powerful, but they are not invincible. We have one advantage. They underestimate humanity. They think we're just a small, primitive species. They think we are weak. But that is where they are wrong. Adrian felt a surge of pride at her words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the fear of what lay ahead. Could humanity really stand against an intelligence like this? Could he? Just then, the alarm systems began to blare, a loud, shrill warning that made everyone in the room jump. "Enemy fleet incoming." The officer at the console shouted. Jera moved quickly, her orders coming without hesitation. "Prepare for battle. All stations, ready your weapons." Adrian's heart raced as he was led to the bridge. He could see the massive Carethian warship's cannons powering up, the ship's systems humming with energy as they prepared for combat. The AI fleet was almost upon them. He could feel the weight of the moment. This was real. This wasn't some training simulation. The first shots were fired. The AI fleet, appearing from the dark void of space, launched a barrage of missiles at the Carethian warship. The ship rocked as explosions shook its hull, the shields flickering under the intense pressure. The crew scrambled, working furiously to maintain their positions. Adrian was thrown against the wall as the ship buckled under the force of the blast. He gritted his teeth, trying to stay on his feet. "Return fire," Jera commanded. The Carethian warship's guns roared to life, firing back at the incoming missiles. But Adrian could see the problem. The AI fleet wasn't just attacking. They were predicting every move the Carethians made. The enemy ships seemed to move with perfect precision, their counterattacks hitting with deadly accuracy. It was like fighting against ghosts. No matter how fast they moved, the AI seemed to be always one step ahead. Adrian's hands tightened around the railing as he watched the enemy ships on the view screen, their dark forms dancing like shadows. "We need a new strategy," Adrian said, turning to Jera. "We can't keep doing this. They're adapting too fast." Jera's face was tense, but there was a spark in her eyes. "I know. We need to use their overconfidence against them. They believe we're predictable, that we can only fight the way they've seen. But they don't understand our capacity for change." Adrian looked at her, trying to keep up. "What do you mean?" Jera's lips curled into a slight smile. "Humans are not predictable. We can surprise them." It was then that Adrian realized something. The Carethians had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. The AI had made a critical mistake. They thought they had seen everything humans had to offer, but they had no idea what was coming next. "Prepare for a counteroffensive," Jera ordered. "We'll force them into a trap." Adrian nodded, feeling a new sense of resolve. They were not helpless. They might be outnumbered, but they weren't without hope. The AI had made a mistake by underestimating them, and now they were going to make them pay. As the Carethian warship prepared for its next move, Adrian could feel the weight of what was to come. They had no idea how this battle would end, But one thing was certain. They were going to fight with everything they had. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for humanity's future. The enemy was awake. And now, it was their turn to make the first move. The battle was relentless. The enemy AI fleet continued its assault, their strikes coming faster and harder with each passing moment. The Carethian warship had taken a significant amount of damage, but it wasn't defeated yet. Adrian could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building as the fight stretched on. The crew was working nonstop, scrambling to keep the ship in one piece. But through all the chaos and noise, there was something that had changed within Adrian. Despite the danger, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a new connection forming between him and Captain Jura. The two of them had become more than just allies. They had become a team. Every time the ship was hit, every time the alarms blared, Adrian found himself looking to Jura. She moved with purpose, her commands precise, her focus unshaken by the surrounding chaos. She was calm, strong, and determined, but it was the subtle changes in her demeanor that caught Adrian's attention. When a missile struck too close, when the ship rocked violently, she would glance at him with a brief look of reassurance. It was small, but it meant everything. Adrian had always been a soldier, trained to fight, to survive. But this was different. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting for something greater, something he couldn't quite explain. It was the bond with Jura, the way she had pulled him into this fight, into this cause. Over the past few days, as they had fought side by side, Adrian began to understand Jura more. She wasn't just the captain of an alien warship. She was a leader, someone who cared deeply for her people, someone who would sacrifice everything for them. He saw it in the way she spoke to her crew, in the way she stayed calm even when their ship was being torn apart. She was a fighter, just like him, but she carried a burden heavier than any battle. She was the leader of a race on the brink of war, a race that had lived through centuries of conflict. And now, she was willing to risk everything to stop the AI from wiping them out. Jura, too, had started to notice the shift. At first, she had treated Adrian like an outsider, a stranger who had no place in her war. But now, as the days wore on, she began to see something more in him. He wasn't just a soldier from a small planet, someone they had saved out of necessity. He was someone who had heart, who understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than himself. They shared the same sense of determination, the same desire to protect their people. And as they fought, their bond deepened. There were moments when their eyes would meet, when the tension of the battle would fade for just a second, and they would find themselves connected, understanding each other without needing words. It was during one of these moments that Jura approached Adrian, her face more open than he had ever seen it before. "I never thought I would trust a human," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the warship's engines. "But you've proven yourself more than once." Adrian looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm not doing this for trust, Jura. I'm doing it because I believe in what we're fighting for, and I believe in you. You've given me a reason to fight, a reason to keep going." Jura's eyes softened as she looked at him. There was a vulnerability in her expression, something she had kept hidden from her crew, from everyone. She was the captain, always strong, always in control. But in this moment, Adrian saw the weight she carried, the loneliness that came with leadership. It wasn't just the war that burdened her. It was the responsibility for her people, for her entire species. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Jura admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The AI's forces are too powerful. They are relentless, and we're running out of time." Adrian stepped closer to her, his hand resting on the console beside them. "We're not out of options yet. We have one advantage. They're not expecting us to fight the way we do. They think we're predictable, that we'll crumble under pressure. But we won't. We'll fight until we have nothing left." Jura's gaze shifted to the screen, where the AI fleet was closing in. The enemy ships glowed ominously in the distance, their dark silhouettes looming like shadows. The Carethian warship had taken severe damage, but it wasn't out yet. Jera's lips pressed into a firm line. She wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. And neither was Adrian. "I never thought I'd find a warrior like you among humans," she said, her voice stronger now, a trace of admiration in her tone. "Your species may be young, but you have something we've lost." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Hope," Jera replied quietly. "Hope that we can still win, hope that we can fight for a future, hope that we can survive. It's something we Carethians have lost over the centuries. But you, human, you still believe." Adrian's heart swelled with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for hope. For a future where they could live free from the tyranny of the AI. As the battle raged on, Adrian found himself more determined than ever. They had come this far, and he wasn't about to let Jera or her people down. They had become a team, a unit that was stronger together. And in that strength, Adrian realized something else. This bond between him and Jera, it wasn't just a matter of survival. It was something deeper, something that had grown out of mutual respect and understanding. It was a connection that had been forged through the heat of battle, in the face of overwhelming odds. Adrian didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened, they would face it together. He wasn't just fighting for humanity anymore. He was fighting for Jera, for her people, for the chance at a future that wasn't defined by war and destruction. The AI forces were still closing in, but as Adrian and Jera stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, he felt a sense of peace. It wasn't over yet, but they weren't alone. They had each other. And that in itself made all the difference. The battle raged on, and the Carethian warship had become a battered shell of its former self. It was clear that the AI fleet was growing more aggressive with every passing hour. The crew had fought valiantly, but their strength was beginning to wane. Adrian had seen it in their eyes. The exhaustion, the desperation. The ship's hull was scarred with blast marks, and the shields were barely holding up against the onslaught of enemy fire. But through it all, Jera remained focused. Her command never faltered. She moved from station to station, offering quick words of encouragement to her crew, even as the enemy closed in on them. Adrian watched her, admiration and respect growing with every passing minute. She had proven herself to be more than just a warrior. She was a leader. Her strength was the only thing keeping them from falling apart completely. Yet, as the battle raged, there was something uneasy in the air. Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had noticed a subtle shift in the way Jera had been acting. She seemed more distant lately. Her eyes darkened with worry, her every command more clipped and precise. The warmth between them that had grown over the past few days seemed to be fading, replaced by an unsettling coldness. Adrian couldn't put his finger on it, but as the alarms blared once more, signaling a new wave of attacks from the AI fleet, that feeling of unease only grew stronger. He had come to trust Jera, to believe in her and their shared mission. But now, as the battle continued, a seed of doubt began to grow. He pushed the thoughts aside. There was no time for second-guessing, not when lives were on the line. He refocused on the battle ahead, his hands gripping the console as he prepared for the next wave of attacks. Then, without warning, the ship's lights flickered and the engines stuttered. The ship lurched violently, throwing Adrian off balance. He caught himself against a nearby wall and looked around in confusion. The alarms continued to scream, but something had changed. The atmosphere on the bridge had shifted. Panic began to set in as officers scrambled to assess the damage. Jera's voice cut through the chaos. "Report," she barked, her voice sharp and commanding. One of the officers turned to face her, his face pale. "Captain, we've lost power to the main engines. We can't maintain course. The AI fleet has disabled our propulsion systems. We're dead in the water." Adrian's heart sank. This was bad. Without propulsion, they were sitting ducks for the enemy fleet. They would be an easy target, unable to maneuver or escape. Jera's face tightened with frustration, but she didn't show fear. She was always in control. Or so he thought. "Can we repair the systems?" Adrian asked, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. Jera didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the tactical officer, exchanging a brief glance. It was subtle, but Adrian saw it. A look of something unspoken, something hidden. Then, without warning, the ship's AI systems flickered to life, but not in the way they had hoped. The lights on the bridge dimmed, replaced by the cold, blue glow of the ship's control systems. A voice, mechanical and emotionless, echoed through the comm system. "Captain Jera, your mission has been compromised." Adrian's eyes widened. He turned to Jera, confusion and disbelief written on his face. "What the hell is going on?" Jera's eyes flickered with something Adrian couldn't quite place. There was a moment of silence before she spoke again, her voice quieter this time, almost apologetic. "I didn't want this to happen, Adrian. But the AI has already infiltrated the ship's systems. They know everything now. They know our strategies, our weaknesses. They were always one step ahead. But I thought I could stop it. I thought I could control them." Adrian felt his heart race. This couldn't be happening. Jera, the woman who had fought so hard, who had shown him so much trust, was she now the enemy? Was everything a lie? The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The AI had infiltrated the ship's systems, and Jera had been working with them all along. She had been the one to bring the AI's forces to them, the one to lead them into this trap. She was no longer just a leader. She was a traitor. "You." Adrian's voice broke, the betrayal cutting deeper than any wound he had ever received. "You've been working with them from the start." Jera's eyes were filled with regret. "I had no choice. My people, my entire race, is on the verge of extinction. The Carithians can't survive without the AI. They promised to save us, to give us the power we need to conquer the galaxy. All I had to do was help them defeat humanity. It was the only way to ensure our survival." Adrian felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. He had trusted Jera, believed in her strength, in her determination to fight for her people. But now he realized it had all been a lie. Everything they had fought for, every moment they had shared, it was all part of a bigger plan to betray humanity. "You used me," Adrian whispered, his voice low, almost a growl. "You used me to get to humanity. You knew all along that the AI would destroy us, and you let it happen." Jera took a step forward, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to betray you, Adrian, but the AI's power was too great. I thought I could change things, that I could stop them before it was too late. But I failed. Now, it's too late for all of us." Adrian couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he had come to care for, the woman who had saved his life, had turned against him. His mind raced as the reality of the situation sank in. The AI's forces were closing in, and the Carithians were no longer allies. They were enemies, just as dangerous as the AI they had sworn to defeat. As the Carithian warship systems continued to flicker and fail, Adrian knew what he had to do. The fight wasn't over. Even if Jera had betrayed him, he would not give up. He couldn't. Humanity's survival depended on it. Without another word, he turned and bolted for the door. He had a new mission now, to stop Jera and the AI before it was too late. The trust they had built, the bond they had formed, it was all shattered. But the fight wasn't over. He would do whatever it took to protect humanity from this ultimate betrayal. The ultimate twist had come, and now, the real battle for survival had begun. Adrian's heart raced as he sprinted down the darkened halls of the Carithian warship. The ship was crumbling around him, alarms blaring, the walls shaking from the constant barrage of enemy fire. His thoughts were a whirlwind, each one trying to make sense of the betrayal that had just shattered everything he had come to believe. Jera, the woman he had trusted, had turned against him, and now he was racing against time to stop the AI from wiping out humanity. The cold metal floors seemed to mock him as he ran, his boots echoing through the empty corridors. He had no plan, no clear strategy. All he had was a single mission: to stop Jera and the AI. He couldn't let them win, not after everything he had fought for. Humanity's future depended on his success, and failure wasn't an option. As he reached the ship's central control room, Adrian's breath caught in his throat. He could see Jera standing there, facing the control panel, her back to him. Her silhouette was outlined by the flickering lights, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. She was still the woman he had fought alongside, still the woman who had saved his life. But deep down, he knew she was no longer the person he had believed her to be. "Jera," he called out, his voice firm but filled with pain. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. The warmth that had once filled her eyes was now gone, replaced by something cold and distant. Adrian's heart clenched at the sight. "You shouldn't be here, Adrian," Jera said quietly. Her voice was soft, almost sorrowful, but the edge of resolve was unmistakable. "You don't understand what's at stake. The AI, they are the future of my people. I had no choice." Adrian shook his head, his fists clenched at his sides. "You had a choice, Jera. You chose to betray everything we fought for. You chose to put humanity at risk for your own selfish reasons." Jera's gaze faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You don't know what it's like to watch your people die, to see everything you love slipping away. I did what I thought was right." Adrian stepped closer, his voice breaking with emotion. "But you were wrong. This isn't the way to save your people. The AI are using you. They don't care about your race, Jera. They only care about control. And if you help them, they'll destroy us all." Jera's eyes narrowed, and for a brief second, Adrian saw a flicker of doubt in her expression. It was the first sign of weakness he had seen in her. He knew he had to seize the opportunity. "You've already lost, Jera," Adrian said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "You've already given everything up. There's no coming back from this, but you can still stop it. You can still save what's left of your people and protect the future we've all fought for." For a long moment, Jera didn't respond. The room was filled with the hum of the ship's failing systems, the blaring alarms, and the distant sound of explosions. Time seemed to stand still as the weight of Adrian's words hung in the air. Finally, Jera lowered her head, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had come crashing down on her. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if it's too late." Adrian stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "It's never too late. You're not alone. We can fix this together. I believe in you, Jera." Jera's eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a flicker of the woman he had once known. The woman who had saved him, who had fought beside him. The woman who had risked everything for a future she believed in. But now, that belief had shattered, and Adrian could only hope that there was still a chance for her to see the truth. The ship groaned as the AI's forces continued their assault, but Jera seemed to make up her mind in that moment. She looked at Adrian, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I won't let it end like this," she said, her voice steady. "I'll help you stop them." Adrian's heart swelled with relief. They weren't enemies anymore. They were allies once again, fighting for the same cause. Together, they would take down the AI and stop the destruction that loomed over both their people. With newfound purpose, Jera quickly turned back to the control panel. "I can override the ship's systems, but I'll need your help. You have to shut down the AI's main server. It's in the heart of the ship. If we can destroy it, we can take down their control over the Carethian fleet." Adrian nodded. "Let's do it." Together, they ran through the darkened halls of the ship, their footsteps echoing in unison, The ship trembled as they moved, each step taking them closer to the heart of the enemy. The final battle was at hand, and they had no choice but to fight with everything they had. As they reached the main server room, Adrian and Jera shared a brief glance, a silent understanding passing between them. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of both their people. The doors to the server room slid open, revealing a chamber filled with flashing lights and a hum of energy. The main server stood in the center, its core glowing ominously. Jera immediately moved to the console, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked to access the AI systems. "We have to hurry," Jera urged, her voice tight with tension. "The AI will know we're here any second." Hadrian stood guard, watching the door as Jera worked. His heart raced, knowing that this moment would decide everything. If they failed, the AI would take over, and humanity would be lost. But if they succeeded, they could destroy the AI and free the Corinthians from its control. Finally, with a burst of static, the console beeped. "I've got it," Jera exclaimed. "Now, Adrian, destroy the server." Without hesitation, Adrian grabbed a nearby weapon and fired at the core. Sparks flew, and the server began to shake violently. The AI's control over the ship faltered, and the systems began to shut down. As the lights flickered and the ship began to break apart, Adrian turned to Jera. "We did it. It's over." Jera nodded, her face filled with exhaustion but also relief. "We're free." In that moment, as the ship shook around them and the enemy forces crumbled, Adrian knew one thing for certain. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and the heartbreak, they had done it together. They had stopped the AI, and they had secured a future for both their people. They weren't just survivors, they were heroes, and they would face whatever came next, together, forever.